So, I went to see Texas Chainsaw a few hours ago, and I said on Facebook I might do a review, so here it is. Firstly, I want to get the confusion out of the way. The title of the movie is simply Texas Chainsaw. It doesn't have the word massacre in it, though a lot of places attach 3D to the title because you can see it in 3D, but I go by on-screen titles and I didn't see 3D there. Secondly, since the title is so simple, a lot of people are wondering if this is a remake or another reboot or if it's connected to the previous films. And to answer that, I have to very briefly go over the history of the series. The first movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, came out in 1974, and it got a sequel in 1986 simply called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. But although it's a sequel, it had a lot of different characters, and some saw the connections between the two as being very loose. The third and fourth movies were Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 in 1990, and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Next Generation, which was originally released as The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1995, and then under its current title in 1997, which sort of stand on their own, both of those movies. Although they're ostensibly sequels, they just take the most popular character, Leatherface, and transplant him into new settings with no connection to the original or its sequel. Then there was the remake in 2003, which was The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and its prequel, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, in 2006. These have a completely different plot line, although there's some similarities. The Leatherface character is a completely different person in a completely different family. The new film, Texas Chainsaw, is sort of a sequel and it's sort of a reboot. Basically, it takes place after the 1974 film, and it's not connected to the remake or its prequel, and it ignores the events of 2, 3, and New Generation. Essentially, it takes the place of the second movie. The plot is pretty basic. After the events of the original film, a local sheriff shows up at the Sawyer house to arrest Jed Sawyer, aka Leatherface, but the family is reluctant to send him out. Realizing the sheriff is called back up and he doesn't know about the family's habits of capturing, murdering, and cannibalizing people, he thinks Jed is the only murderer in the family. They reluctantly agree to give him up, but before this happens, a group of angry townsfolk show up, led by this asshole Bert Hartman, who whips everyone up into a frenzy of mob justice. They attack the Sawyer house and burn it down, seemingly killing everyone inside. The sheriff doesn't approve of this and he files his own report, but it gets buried because Bert becomes the mayor. This other asshole, Gavin, finds Jed's aunt survived with her baby and takes the baby away from her before kicking her to death, and he takes it home to raise with his wife who can't have kids. 20 years later, the baby is grown into the main character, Heather, who gets a note in the mail that her grandmother died. Now, she never knew she had any living grandparents, so she asks her parents about it, and they basically just yell at her and tell her to stay the hell away from Texas. Well, she goes anyway, along with her boyfriend, her best friend, some other guy, and some random asshole they pick up along the way. They meet with Heather's lawyer, who tells her that her grandmother was Vera Sawyer Carson, who left the Carson mansion and grounds to her, and tells her several times to be sure to read a letter from her grandmother, which she neglects to do. Turns out, of course, Jed Sawyer is alive and well in the basement, and these dickforks send him into another rampage. Most of them get killed, and it sends the town into a frenzy, particularly the mayor, who, learning there are surviving Sawyers, is eager to finish the job, and the sheriff, who wants to do things right this time. Leatherface chases everyone around and kills a few people, but Heather escapes, yells at the lawyer for not telling her about all this, though, to be fair, he did tell her to read the fucking letter, which would have made things pretty damn simple and easy. Anyway, the mayor and his asshole son capture Heather and take her to a meat processing plant to torture and murder, but Leatherface shows up, and realizing that this is his cousin, protects her, and the two remaining Sawyers team up against the two remaining Hartmans. So, okay, the burning question is, as a direct sequel, does Texas Chainsaw live up to the lofty reputation of the original classic? Not even remotely so. While the original was a great mixture of slowly building tension, creepy atmosphere, subtlety, and black comedy, this sequel is a lot of jump scares, extremely gory violence, and chase scenes. Knowing that, does this make Texas Chainsaw a bad movie? Not necessarily. My best way of summing up the overall quality is that it starts off by sucking, but then it gets better in the second half and redeems itself into an average film. If you try to compare it to the original, or even the remake, it comes off poorly, but if you take it as a standalone experience, it's pretty good. I'd say it's definitely more entertaining than Part 3 and miles better than Next Generation. The main issue I had with it was the total lack of subtlety. The original was scary because they didn't show people getting sawed in half brutally. It had its moments, like when Leatherface burst out of his hiding spot and took a character out with a fast hammer blow, but it was less about what you saw and more about what you didn't see, and it let your imagination fill in the blanks. This movie leaves nothing to the imagination. It goes right for the visceral, gut-wrenching violence and the jump scares. It does, however, have a story that gets more interesting as it goes along, and having watched it in 3D, I can say it's visually a treat. The 3D is done extremely well, and the movie is never boring. And I did like the concept of Heather becoming embroiled in a 20-year-old family feud. The film does have its share of logistical flaws. One example is that the movie takes place supposedly 20 years after the original, so it should take place in the 90s, before smartphones were invented, but they use smartphones in the movie. Either that, or it would take place today, and Heather should be nearly 40 years old. But you have to take it in stride. When you watch this movie, you're basically watching trash, but it's fun trash. Another thing I liked was that it sort of reminded me of The Devil's Rejects, in which the killers from the first film were up against something even worse, and then came across as sympathetic anti-heroes, despite the fact they were all serial killers. In this film, the Sawyer family, who duped, captured, and cannibalized countless people, are treated as murder victims, and Leatherface, less like a maniac with a chainsaw, and more of a wounded, mentally challenged man who would do anything to protect his family. It basically presents the other side of the story. It just does this in the most blunt and ham-fisted way possible. Overall, if you're a fan of the series and you're not expecting it to be the perfect sequel to the original classic, I'd recommend you see it. It's not the best one in the series, but it's not the worst one either. It's sort of in the middle. 5 out of 10 from me. I enjoyed it, but I do have to acknowledge its many flaws.